mighty companions and fellow miracle workers. It's time for Wednesday Wisdom, and this week I want to talk about guilt. There are two kinds of guilt. There is conscious guilt, where we do something that we know we shouldn't have done or that we feel bad about doing. And that conscious guilt requires an apology. We need to make amends when we do something offensive to someone, and we need to own up to our part and say we're sorry and then move on. Once we've made amends or apologized or done whatever it is that we can to make things right, we should be able to drop that guilt and go on with our life. But the unconscious guilt is especially tricky because it's unconscious. It's hidden in our subconscious and it's hard to identify and deal with. So how can you know if you are experiencing unconscious guilt? It's pretty simple. Anytime you feel discomfort or unease, there's guilt involved. Anytime you're not at perfect peace, there's unconscious guilt involved. And anytime that you are doing something that feels like an obligation, a responsibility, or something that you need to do out of a sense of loyalty, those are red flags for guilt. Those are egoic tactics to trick you into doing something that you really don't want to do so that you can be a better person and people please and do what somebody else wants you to do. And it makes it hard to set clear boundaries when you allow loyalty, obligation, and responsibility, all things which are celebrated by our society, to take precedence over what your heart tells you. So those are sneaky forms of guilt. And when you see that discomfort, that unease is happening, that very awareness allows you to start undoing the unconscious guilt and to release it. So as usual, I have a story to share with you about guilt, and it's a personal story of mine from parenting. So I have 3 children, and the oldest one is a son. And I didn't have him until I was in my 30s. I didn't have a lot of experience with children. I wasn't super excited about parenting or raising children, but my son was born and I tried so hard to do everything right with him. When I was growing up, I got spankings, and I remember vowing to myself that when I grew up and had children, I would never ever spank my children. But what happened was my role models were parents who didn't always have patience with me. And so when I got stressed out trying to deal with my young son, I would often lash out at him and sometimes spank him, and then feel terribly guilty afterwards. I actually even spanked him one time in a bathroom stall when we were out somewhere in public, and somebody in the stall next to me in the ladies' room said, maybe he would behave better if you quit hitting him or something like that. And I was just mortified. I didn't want to be that kind of parent that was always trying to control everything, but I didn't know any other way to parent. I found it impossible to be relaxed and be a parent at the same time. Anyway, getting back to the story about guilt. When my son was older, I would lay in bed at night and complain to my husband about how I had not raised him the way that I should have. If only I had been kinder, if only I had been gentler, if only I had been more relaxed, I would have been such a better parent. And I would beat myself up for the damage that I believed that I had caused my son in his formative years. And my husband would say, just let it go. Let it go. That was 15 years ago. You can't do anything about it now. Just be a good parent now and stop fretting about what happened 15 years ago. But I didn't know how to let it go. I didn't want to have those thoughts going around in my head every night, but I didn't know how to release them. And here is the light bulb moment that I had, the big insight that I had. I realized all of a sudden one day that by feeling guilty about how I had raised my son, I thought I was doing something about it. My ego had rationalized that feeling guilty about my behavior was the same as doing something about my behavior. But obviously it wasn't, because I continued to behave in this controlling and impatient way for many years afterwards. And it was almost like I was letting myself off the hook for that behavior by hitting myself mentally and making myself feel guilty to atone for my behavior. So the solution to the problem was to start seeing my son in a different light. Instead of seeing him as a difficult child that I struggled to raise, who always needed correction and I needed to control, I started to see him as exactly perfect, just the way he was, a holy child of God, an innocent young man who didn't ask to be born into my family, but was doing the best that he could. And when I shifted my perspective from it's all about me and I can't get my son to behave the way I want, to it's not all about me, his behavior doesn't reflect on me, he is his own person, then I was able to relax. I was able to treat him with kindness and respect, and then the guilty thoughts went away. So I hope this story is useful for you to see if you are feeling guilty about something and you can't seem to let it go, especially things that happened in the past. We all know we can't change what happened in the past. All we can do is deal with how we feel in the here and now, in the present. So if you have regrets or sorrows about something that happened in the past, look at how you consider that story now in the present. Are you considering it as a failure? Are you looking at yourself in a bad light because you did something that you think you could have done differently? You never could have done anything differently, because you were that person then, and that person only knew how to do what they knew how to do. But now you know better. And when you know better, you can do better. So your point of power is now. Now is where the release of guilt happens, by reframing whatever story you're telling yourself, by letting yourself off the hook and forgiving yourself so that you can move on without the guilt. I hope this has been encouraging and useful for you. If it's not clear, please feel free to drop me a question. I'd love to hear your comments down below. And I'm Teresa McGallagher, and I love you. Bye-bye.